In the 1970s, that was the Mundanium. An abandoned building, broken glass, thousands of boxes guarded by pigeons. And in those boxes, a vast and varied collection of documents, assembled by one man, Paul Otlet.
I repeat, my papers form a whole. Every part is related, and together they compose one unique work. My archives are a mundus mundaneum, a tool designed for world knowledge. Hold on to them. Do with them what I would have done. Do not destroy them.
This message was not heeded. For 30 years, these boxes were inaccessible. They were moved from one place to another, and many were lost before finally being saved and housed permanently in Mons, Belgium. I had to know more about it. I asked Leila, a young researcher, to accompany me on this quest. Who was this man? Was Paul Otlet really the theoretician behind the League of Nations, the inventor of microfilm and of universal decimal classification, a friend of Henri Lafontaine, 1913 Nobel Peace Prize winner, a friend of Le Corbusier, and one of the precursors of the internet? I decided to make a film. We gave ourselves until the end of the year to weave together the life of Paul Otlet from the contents of around 100 personal boxes, which had never been catalogued. Today is April the 24th. Where do we start?
Testament. Moi, nom, prénom.
My writing, it is horrible, and I pity those who have to read me.
Libre.
I write a lot. I write easily and with pleasure. I write in order to clarify my thoughts, to make progress in my work, to remember. I write to stimulate my mind.
Little by little, we begin to understand him, and in that awful spidery scrawl, we discover a man who eagerly reveals himself in writing.
Tout ce que je me rappelle de mon enfance, le voici en
I was
quelques
born in
mots.
Brussels in 1868 from parents who were themselves from Brussels. When my mother died, I must have been 2.5 or 3 years old. Edouard Otlet, my father, was a senator of an independent party with ties to the Catholics. This father of mine was not overly concerned with the details of my education and simply wanted freedom for me. As we didn't go to school, we didn't have any friends. Perhaps that's how I developed my taste for isolation and study. I always see myself being attracted to paper and writing.
Xénophon, géographie grecque.
My father was a true leader in business, a man with a rare talent for finance and a true creator of industry. And the industry? Transportation, railroads and tramways throughout the world. Russia, Argentina, Brazil.
In 1880, nothing is impossible for Edouard Otlet. Nothing is too remote, nothing inaccessible. And Paul, his son, will inherit this feeling of belonging to the world.
L'île du Levant par Paul Otlet, souvenir de 1881.
Fourth day of research, 10th box.
Premier voyage. Manuscrit introduction.
About a year and a half ago, my father informed me that he had just bought the Isle of Levant, the last of the Hyer Islands in the Mediterranean. An island, getting there by boat, to be Robinson Crusoe. Oh, what plans we came up with, what a dream to own an island. Wanting to know everything there was to know about this island, that's what made me the encyclopedist that I am. Obliged to spend the winter there with my brother, I brought back my notes as proof that I had continued to work on my own.
It was on the island of Levant that the adolescent Paul Otlet discovers his passion for collecting.
On our property in Brussels was the chalet where I conducted my studies. On the second floor was my workroom, and my collections room was on the ground floor.
Regarde ce que j'ai trouvé. C'est le plan des vitrines des collections de Paul Otlet. Et qu'il intitule déjà pompeusement Musée Paul Otlet.
Subsequent exposure to books marked me for life. While in high school in Brussels, when I was 15 years old, I was appointed librarian. I could lock myself into the library, look through the books, read whatever I wanted, and peruse the catalogue, which for me was a miracle, this instrument that allowed me to use all those books. That was how my first systemic thoughts were born.
The 8th day. We are forcing our way through Otlet's disorder. Layla is becoming a real detective.
C'est dingue. Il gardait même les trucs déchirés. Regarde, j'ai trouvé là-dedans. C'est quoi, le chocolat? C'est des films, je crois.
In 1911, Otlet invents microfilm with the engineer Robert Goldschmidt. He was one of the first to have the concept of photographically reproducing the pages of books in order to improve archiving. He thinks it is also an economical way of making copies of documents, musical charts, manuscripts, and rare editions available to all. "35th box.
Bonsoir, petite adorée.
While we know next to nothing about Fernande, Paul's wife, suddenly we find evidence of another woman.
Fräulein van Neder-Hasselt. Souvenir d'un dîner. Cato, Catoye, Catoyeke. Ce sont vos trois
Cato.
noms. Un pour
Catoye.
chaque moment.
Katoyeke. Those are your 3 names. One for each moment. 3 strokes of the bow. 3 pinched strings from your full harp, and voila. Quiver, Cato, as I'm watching you. Tremble because I'm touching you. Cato, those who had me have let me go, and I've been yours. I've given myself to you. You help me to know all the splendor of a heart that loves. I'm yours, faithfully, loyally, lovingly.
In 1912, Paul Otlet divorces and marries Cato van Neder-Hasselt. And on the back of this photo he writes, "A loved and loving couple." Through the International Institute of Bibliography, Otlet and La Fontaine discover that there are a significant number of international associations established in Belgium.
International pour la paix, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Comité Nobel du Parlement norvégien, Institut Polaire International, Salvation Army, Conseil international des femmes, Association internationale de la Croix-Rouge, Union internationale des amis de la jeune fille, British and Foreign Anti-Slavery Society, Union postale internationale.
They both recognise the importance of these associations and in 1910 proposed to organise a World Congress of International Associations.
Starting from bibliography, we arrive at internationalism.
From this comes the idea of an international museum designed to demonstrate the progress made in all areas by these associations. The international aspect of this museum intrigues the fabulously wealthy American patron, Andrew Carnegie, the King of Steel, who devoted his fortune to the creation of libraries all over the world. He comes expressly to Brussels in 1913. We discover this unreleased film at the bottom of a box. We see a radiant Paul Otlet, who seems to succeed at everything he does. Otlet guides Carnegie. The Senator La Fontaine and his wife are also present.
The museum still only offers visitors a rough idea of what the founders dream of doing. It is above all a museum of ideas. It is the domain of figures, graphs, diagrams, charts in the service of progress and greater understanding among nations.
I never enjoyed a visit more. I am astonished at what I found. The directors of the international centres have shown themselves clear and far-sighted. We have decided to subsidize this great work because it will bring peace to the world.
This subsidy from the United States encourages Paul Otlet in his future projects. All dreams are now possible. Otlet begins to dream of something even greater. This is when he discovers an amazing project. These are detailed plans for an imaginary city conceived by the Norwegian Henrik Andersen and designed by the French architect Ernest Ebrard, Grand Prix de Rome. Andersen wants to assemble the greatest intellectual resources from each nation for the purpose of creating a harmonious, pacifist and progressive civilization. This dream city is being presented in book form to the various countries which might be interested in hosting it. In Belgium, La Fontaine and Otlet respond with great enthusiasm.
February the 24th, 1912. Dear Mr. Andersen, you already know what we think of your project. It is grandiose in its design, and the plans that Monsieur Ebrard showed us are worthy of it. You yourself know what sort of work we have been pursuing and what a curious convergence exists between our respective plans.
Dear Senator La Fontaine and Monsieur Otlet, I thank you most heartily for your kind words and appreciation of the World Centre that for so many years has been my chief mental and physical occupation. These architectural plans of a World Centre were created absolutely upon idealistical principles of harmonizing humanity.
Rome. Piazza del Popolo. 200 meters away is the palace that Andersen built, the Villa Hélène, now known as the Andersen Museum. We came in search of documents, but we discover a whole world. We go from surprise to surprise. Henrik Andersen was not Norwegian, but American. He was not an architect, but a sculptor and fervent admirer of Michelangelo. We decide to extend our stay in Rome. In this palace, Andersen lived with his mother, Hélène, and also with Olivia Cushing, his sister-in-law, a writer. She kept a detailed journal up until her death in 1917. The conception of the World Centre is recounted there daily.
Oh, the wonderful dream of contributing even one step toward the United States of the world. It is one of the inevitable outcomes of the future. We shall move the world now, I am certain of it.
Dear Mr. Andersen, you should set up your World Centre in Belgium. We are thinking about Tervuren, near the Soigny Forest, not far from the Congo Palace. There's more than 300 hectares available.
I feel quite sure, my dear friend Otlet, that the King of Belgium has a keen sympathy towards our World Centre, and I am sure that he has no objection to its establishment in Belgium. Affectionately yours, Anderson.
With the support of Paul Otlet, Anderson is received by King Albert. The sovereign is interested in the idea of building a world centre in the vicinity of Brussels. Early July. Return to Mons and to our boxes.
Voilà le diplôme du prix Nobel.
In November of 1913, Henri Lafontaine receives the Nobel Peace Prize. It is true recognition of the work he has conducted for 20 years with Paul Otlet. Thanks to the generous amount of the prize, 143,000 Norwegian kroner, Lafontaine will be able to finance Paul Otlet's projects with the Union of International Associations for many years to come.
Disaster has struck. It has torn me from all the current of my thoughts, my peace of mind, my codifications. I witnessed the full progression of the invasion, right up to the decapitation of our state. The new world that we thought we were forming through the crust of prejudice is probably set back now for centuries.
The war has only just begun, and Paul Otlet is already working for future peace.
In October of 1914, I wrote my book, The End of War, which I managed to get out in 5 short weeks. In it, I explained how I conceived of the League of Nations in the form of a world charter. Its purpose would be to maintain the peace, guarantee international rights, and manage the common interest of all humanity.
While this book is being clandestinely published in Brussels, Paul Otlet learns that one of his sons is utterly destitute in Calais. He decides to bring him comfort. Via Holland, England and France, he arrives at the Belgian front.
My son was reported missing in the Battle of Stuyvekenskerke. I haven't been able to find him. And then I was refused permission to return to Belgium. I've been on the road ever since.
In exile, Paul Otlet's main occupation is the restoration of peace. He drafts manifesto upon manifesto and organizes numerous conferences. In Geneva in 1916, he publishes International Problems and War, in which he defines his concept of the future League of Nations. 60th box. June the 24th, 1917. Paul Otlet finally learns the fate of his youngest son.
Retour à l'envoyeur, destinataire introuvable.
My poor, dear Jean is no longer missing.
Aaron Jean Otlet, soldat belge.
Now we know that he's dead. 2 hours ago, I heard it from Marcel. Poor Jean has died a hero. A bullet to the head killed him on the Isère, the day the Germans crossed the river. Dear Jean, dear son, all my memories of you as a little boy come flooding back, as well as the memory of the young man. In him, I see all of youth decimated, all the blood that flows, the millions that other bullets on other battlefields have felt. And I sense in myself something stronger than hatred, not against man, but against the whole abominable system that provoked this cataclysm. I'm more committed than ever to revenge. I will avenge him by working, so that his sacrifice will mean something and serve as progress toward a world finally delivered from war.
The death of his son and the total destruction of Westender forces Paul Otlet to an inevitable decision.
Forgetting my family and friends, forgetting my business interests, I have resolved to devote myself to this immense work, to describe the conditions of a superior human city entirely devoted to peace. the nations have resolved to put forward the principles that must from henceforth serve as the basis for the new order. International war shall be abolished, as shall civil war and private war. All war shall be declared a crime against humanity and as such shall be repressed.
Paul Otlet.
November 21st, 1918, King Albert returns to Belgium. He is greeted as a hero. For Paul Otlet, it is the moment to see his ideas triumph. The future League of Nations must be set up in Brussels. This will constitute a pledge of peace and a means to compensate for the suffering endured by Belgium.
Dear Anderson, long live the victory that will certainly be that of our ideas. It is the time to work on this project. What are you doing? What do you propose? You must come here, now. Best regards.
Dear Otlet, I beg you and Senator Lafontaine to do all that is possible in bringing our project of the city before the peace conference, and that we may be able to build it in Tervuren. Make plans and keep our work alive.
One of the goals of the peace conference held in Paris on April the 24th, 1919, was the creation of the League of Nations, which would be responsible for the arbitration of conflicts between states. Belgium's candidacy was ruled out by President Wilson of the United States. In his opinion, it was not feasible to choose one of the warring countries. Geneva is approached by reason of its neutrality. The visit of President Wilson and King Albert to the ruins of Isère does not alter this decision. In Belgium, there is great disappointment. Otlet drops his Brussels plan and proposes that the future League of Nations collaborate with his international union. August 19th, we have gone through 80 boxes. King Albert, during a visit to Washington, decides to support Paul Otlet's projects. He grants to the Union of International Associations the left wing of the Cinquantenaire, while awaiting construction of the new buildings in Geneva. An annual subsidy is allocated by the government.
Here, in this world palace, shall be assembled an immense collective work that brings together the living portraits of all nations, the prodigious findings of all the sciences, and the marvels of all civilizations.
In its 150 rooms, Otlet can finally put his pacifist dream into practice, offering improved knowledge of the world to all. At the same time, he pursues his bibliographic work.
On trouve également au cinquantenaire la totalité de l'Institut international de bibliographie, dont la 12 millionième fiche va être placée dans son casier par le directeur, l'éminent savant qui est l'honneur de la Belgique, Monsieur Paul Otlet.
En avant, en avant, en avant. Je garde mon amniste en avant. Écrasons le monstre de la guerre, instaurons une ère nouvelle sur la terre. En avant, en avant, en avant.
But soon, the wind turns for Otlet. In 1924, the Belgian government wishes to take back part of the premises of the Cinquantenaire and doesn't hesitate to use force.
The uncomprehending, the envious, the sceptics are in league against the work. To prefer commercial rubber fare to a world palace, what shame for our beloved nation. Belgium once again is the country of missed opportunities. Little country, little people, little ideas.
In Rome, Anderson takes off in a completely different direction. In the hope of finally making his world centre a success, he moves closer to Mussolini.
Dear friend Otlet, I am still struggling with the Italian government to have our world city established in Ostia near Roma. I ask for a private audience with His Excellency Mussolini, and I hope to be able to convince him. Affectionately yours, Hendrik Anderson.
My dear Anderson, you love Italy, as do I. But are you aware of all the international political difficulties that leap to mind with respect to this country just at the moment?
Disappointed by Anderson, disgusted with Belgium, Paul Otlet seeks a closer collaboration with the League of Nations. He wants to transfer his collections and associations to Geneva.
Why Geneva? Because the site is beautiful, the location central, the legal protection simple. Because Geneva is synonymous with international relations. Because the International Labour Organization is there, as will be the League of Nations.
September 15th, 86th box. And now, a new player enters the stage. Le Corbusier. What a strange alliance between this most modern of architects and the aged bibliographer.
Paris, le 7 octobre 1927. À Monsieur Otlet. Bien reçu votre lettre et votre note sur le transfert à Genève du Palais mondial. Votre idée magnifique et émouvante continue l'initiative que vous avez prise depuis des années. Je suis vraiment avec vous en toute sympathie. Cordialement à vous, Le Corbusier.
Brussels, April the 2nd, 1928. To Monsieur Le Corbusier and Jeanneret. You will bring to the project your architectural expertise. Assuming the risks of the plan, you will work with us to transform possibilities into reality. What we are involved in, my dear sirs, is a work, a great work. It requires all full strength of intelligence, feeling, and desire. Mundaneum opus maximum.
7 juillet 1928. Cher monsieur, les plans du Mundaneum sont bientôt terminés. Ils ont été faits très scrupuleusement et ils ne sont pas dépourvus de grandeur, tout en étant foncièrement réalistes. C'est peut-être bien un manifeste d'architecture moderne. Votre ami, Le Corbusier. Le visiteur pénètre dans le musée par le haut. 3 nefs se déroulent parallèlement côte à côte, sans cloison pour les séparer. Au départ de la spirale, les temps préhistoriques et la représentation succincte que nous en avons. Puis les premières époques dites historiques. Et descendant la spirale, à la suite des unes des autres, toutes les civilisations mondiales.
The project constantly increases in scope. Otlet wants a world city as grandiose as that imagined by Anderson. It requires 566,000 hectares, 5 million francs in gold, and universal subscription.
The world city will be a colossal book, with buildings and a layout that will be read, just like the stones of the cathedrals were read by the people of the Middle Ages. An immense structure would rise with time. From the index card to the world city.
26 juillet. L'heure a sonné. On part dans le large. On lance des ondes. On touchera aux antennes accordées qui par le monde sont capables d'enregistrer. Très heureux d'avoir pu matérialiser votre grande conception. En hâte, Le Corbusier.
Brochures and press campaigns follow suit. The original plans in a gigantic diorama go on exhibition in Geneva during the summer of 1929. Otlet wants to base his world city on the model of the newly created Vatican, but the idea of an international zone infuriates the Swiss.
Halte là, messieurs.
Halte là.
Messieurs, Genève est suisse et entend le
Elle n'a
reste.
que faire de ses projets dans les nuées. Elle vous prie instamment de ne pas la confondre avec un caravansérail.
Too bad for Geneva. Others will want to be that little kernel of hope that it had started to be.
Here we are in Geneva.
Voici, madame, le projet de monsieur Paul Otlet à Genève.
Le mondanéum, la cité mondiale serait là. Le palais des nations est là.
We are struck by the total absence of any trace of this project. Almost no archives, even fewer memories. It is as if the Swiss had wanted to forget the whole thing. Back in Mons. The economic crisis which reached Belgium at the beginning of the 30s renders the world city more unlikely than ever. Otlet does not want to concede defeat. He clings to his congresses and dreams. While there is talk of his expulsion, he thinks only of extending his collections.
Do not discard printed matter or documents. Do not destroy them. Do not use them like old papers. Don't give them to those who would only make heinous use of them. We are seeking books, brochures, reviews, newspapers, catalogues, prospecti, circulars, propaganda publications, maps, photographs, drawings, diagrams, illustrated postcards, samples.
Alors, j'ai trouvé ici des choses sur la cité mondiale à Anvers.
October 2nd, we reached the 100th box.
Concours, aménagement du territoire sur la rive gauche de l'Escaut.
My dear friend, I return to the question of Antwerp, where there are some very interesting possibilities. The competition is open for the development of 1,000 hectares of land just outside of Antwerp.
Once again, we see Paul Otlet's enthusiasm for this new project, and contrary to all expectations, Le Corbusier following him.
26 mai 1933. Cher ami, excusez mon silence, nous avons travaillé comme des nègres. Sur nos plans, la cité mondiale est insérée comme si elle était construite depuis les temps les plus reculés, tant elle est en harmonie avec le reste.
La cité mondiale reçoit immédiatement un statut autonome à l'initiative du gouvernement belge.
For you, Anvers, Antwerp, Antwerpia. For you, the ancient, the noble, the still vital. Have the good grace to accept this project, the world center, the Mundaneum. It has been largely inspired by you, largely designed for you. May it also come to fruition with you.
There will be no world city outside of Antwerp. Nonetheless, Le Corbusier will remain faithful to Otlet until the end. A fresh surprise. During these years when everything is going so badly, when the bibliographic index is getting bogged down, Paul Otlet takes up producing current event films. One a week, which he shows on Sunday mornings at the World Palace.
Sunday, March the 24th, 1934. Berlin. Military service becomes obligatory. The Germans applaud. Assembled on the Palace Square, the Reichswehr troops await the arrival of Chancellor Hitler. In Paris, at the Parc des Princes, the first Hitlerian salute by German supporters. In Rome, Benito Mussolini presents his two sons at the festivals of fascist youth. Europe trembles. Peace is in danger.
June 1st, 1934. Arriving at the Cinquantenaire, Paul Otlet finds the doors locked by order of the government. He immediately alerts the press and with his supporters camps out for several days in front of the entrance.
Le palais mondial est mort, les collections à l'abandon, la bataille du cinquantenaire.
In his house on the Rue Fétis, Otlet sets up a provisional secretariat, while a defense committee is organized.
Public opinion, awake! The World Palace has been closed by force, with the archives and collections sequestered inside. What do they want to bring down in the World Palace? Is it a work of peace, of universal documentation, of healthy democracy? Do we want to keep public opinion systematically ignorant of what is going on in the world? I urge all of you to demand the reopening of the World Palace.
Also in 1934, Otlet publishes his most important book, the Treatise on Documentation, the Book on the Book. This is where we find the most visionary pages, where already the concept of the computer emerges.
Here, the workspace is no longer cluttered with any books. In their place, a screen and a telephone within reach. Over there, in an immense edifice, are all the books and information. From there, the page to be read, in order to know the answer to the question asked by telephone, is made to appear on the screen. A screen could be divided in half, by 4, or even by 10, if multiple texts and documents had to be consulted simultaneously. There would be a loudspeaker if the image had to be complemented by oral data, and this improvement could continue to the point of automating the call for on-screen data. Cinema, phonographs, radio, television, these instruments taken as substitutes for the book will in fact become the new book. The most powerful works for the diffusion of human thought. This will be the radiated library and the televised book.
À Melisa, ces dernières épreuves apportées par Guillaume, dat was de naam van de drukker, de achternaam van de drukker, après 5 mois de travail à la même table. À ton tour de semer par le livre et le pré-livre la parole, le bon grain pour documentation, institut et mandaneam. Paul Otlet, 1933-07-20. Deze tekst heeft professor Otlet geschreven in mijn exemplaar van het traité de documentation. Ik ben in de herfst van 1932 daar gekomen als au pair meisje, maar in plaats van in het huishouden te werken, hielp ik de heer des huizes met het ter perse brengen van zijn handboek over documentatie. Dat is in onze documentatie- en bibliotheekkringen een van de standaardwerken op dat gebied. En als ik het wel heb, heeft Otlet ook het woord documentation voor het eerst gebruikt. Zoals hij ook het woord monde, mondial, voor het eerst heeft gebruikt. Mijn werk bestond erin het boek zo ver te krijgen dat de drukker het kon produceren. En dat hield dus in dat ik probeerde, waar het hier en daar slecht leesbaar was, de tekst leesbaar te maken. Ik had er een speciale bril voor. Je ziet dus hier heel goed die tafel. Hier zat ik en hier zat oom Paul. Een enorme tafel was het. Hij had veel gevoel voor humor. Hij was ontzettend knap. Hij was altijd bereid om naar de ander te luisteren. Het gekke is, hij sprak heel mooi Frans, maar hij was niet begaafd voor talen. Zijn Engels was execrabel. Ja, hij was exceptioneel. Wat vader zei, als een universeel genie.
I constantly classify new links in my mind and reduce everything to a cyclical concept. I think in terms of the universal and the cosmos, distilling everything down to a small number of essential ideas.
November, the 110th box. Faced with an increasingly difficult political situation and the innumerable difficulties confronting the World Palace, on May 15th, 1939, Paul Otlet offers his entire work to the President of the United States, Franklin Roosevelt.
Man have been pulled away from the great construction. To save the essential, we'll need the ark, the navis mundaneum. For now, it is afloat on the raging floods. It is sailing full sail toward the sun that already embraces the vast horizon with all its fire. November 1939, the hour of utter agony. The two fronts are going to attack one another. It's the hour when little Belgium, for the second time, may become involved in a war that is not its own. How horrible. The League of Nations, mute and muzzled, has disappointed us all. The space that should have been a sacred one for cooperation has been used as a battleground for egotism and rivalries. We have got to start again from zero.
The world moves towards chaos, and Otlet is increasingly consumed with his obsession, saving his life's work, preserving the mundaneum.
To ensure a just and lasting peace, Almighty of this world, might you intervene? The most profound incarnation of Master of Russia, who Stalin, who said so often that you were Asian, Duce, Mussolini. You had a taste for Churchill. You are not only Lord Churchill and the Prime Minister of the organization, Cadillo Franco. You said one day that in a not-so-dissident Helvetia, forces would once again line up and yet so great Switzerland. Holy Father, you represent heaven in favor of the international organization and one of its most powerful assets, the World City.
December, 122nd box.
C'est une lettre pour Hitler. Au Führer, 1941, mars 10. Excellence, au moment où s'opère à Bruxelles la dispersion du Palais mondial, notre pensée se tourne vers vous. Vous qui avez la responsabilité du Reich et qui par le Reich participez à la responsabilité du monde, nous vous invitons à considérer le projet de la cité mondiale qui pour l'Allemagne présenterait de grands avantages. Cette demande est largement désintéressée.
May this idea meet with your deepest support. Paul Otlet.
This proposal of the World City to Hitler will never be realized. The Germans distrust Otlet and keep him under close surveillance. During searches of his home, they find hundreds of books, which are considered to be anti-German. Moreover, they suspect him of being a Freemason, a pacifist, and a communist. As of January 1941, the World Palace and its collections fall under German jurisdiction, and the collections are expelled, manu militari.
Tout était projeté, cassé, détruit à coups de pied, à coups de bottes, à coups de crosse. Et on créait des pyramides d'objets du Palais mondial. Et on était là, impuissants à voir donc cette destruction systématique. Évidemment, en quelques jours, avec quelques centaines de soldats, tout fut démoli. Et nous avons eu comme charge de prendre, de tâcher de réparer et de transporter tous les débris du Palais mondial au parc Léopold.
To do your utmost and not to doubt. Alone even before the indifferent and hostile immensity. To play the last odds. The ultimate probability that the luck of the draw might offer. To do your utmost and not to doubt.
With the liberation of Brussels, Paul Otlet presents himself before the World Palace at the Cinquantenaire, symbolically retaking possession.
Together, we rejoice in the liberation. In the same spirit, we will restore this great work, now shattered, murdered, and mutilated. Let us prepare the world city.
Paul Otlet dies on the night of December the 10th, 1944, at the age of 76. The collections of the Mundaneum remain warehoused at the Parc Léopold until 1972, on which date the city of Brussels demands recovery of the premises. One of its managers characterized the Mundaneum as becoming the wandering Jew of global documentation. With each move, whole sections of the collections disappeared. 70 tons destroyed in 1970, 23 tons in 1980, 6 containers in 1993. Until finally, rescue in Mons in 1996. Paul Otlet may have taken this dream of stone and paper with him, this utopia of the world city, designed to bring together and disseminate universal knowledge. But he was not wrong. The world city is embodied in the invisible connections that link us one to another, from one side of the globe to the other, thanks to the internet.
Before our very eyes, an immense machinery for intellectual work is being constructed. This machinery will serve as a veritable mechanical and collective brain. A universal publication system, condensing all of the fragmentary and individual data and kept constantly up to date, must be assembled for each branch of the sciences and other activities. This network must link production centers, distributors, and users. Any person with data to be made known or a proposition to present or defend will be able to do so, or with a minimum of effort and a guarantee of quality and safety, will be able to obtain any information.
Jeune garde mondaniste, en avant, démasquons l'hypocrisie déshonorant l'humanité. Vive la paix entre peuples, vive fraternité. En avant, en avant, en avant. Jeune garde mondaniste, en avant, pour combattre l'injustice, l'ignorance, la pauvreté. Travaillons tous ensemble pour la liberté. En avant, en avant, en avant. Jeune garde mondaniste, en avant. Écrasons le monstre de la guerre, instaurons une ère nouvelle sur la terre. En avant.